This story is read by Vladislav Ernestov. Before you lies a true account of a man who died on Everest and came back. A story about how fragile the border is between life and death. About the way a heartbeat can stop, yet somewhere deep inside, breath still whispers. This is not a story about mountains. It's a story about choice. About cold that creeps not only under your skin, but into your soul. And about how sometimes a miracle is simply someone's footsteps coming your way. You will hear how a man, officially declared dead, awoke in the frozen silence at 8,700 meters and spoke a line that became legend. Close your eyes. Breathe in. We begin a story that will make you believe death is not always the end. On May 26, 2006, a phone rang in a small apartment on the outskirts of Sydney, so ordinary it could have been a pizza delivery. Claire Nolan picked up and heard a voice flattened by altitude. The expedition leader reported that her husband, Edgar, had died on Everest's north face. The wording was short, like a blunt strike. No alternatives. They had left him at about 8,700 meters. He had stopped breathing. 12 hours later, another rope team would see a man on the icy ridge. No mask, no gloves, suit unzipped, sitting cross-legged over a black abyss. But that would be later. For now, Claire's world split into before and after. The silence between the walls grew so dense you could drown in it. Everest is never polite. The summit has its own logic, simple and predatory. The higher you go, the worse your odds. Above 8,000 lies the death zone. Not a poetic phrase from a motivational reel, but a signed medical statement. There isn't enough oxygen. The body is dying, only not at once. Up there the air feels ladled out of the sky. Cells starve, the brain swells, the lungs fill with their own fluid, blood thickens into syrup. Reality drifts. Thoughts lose their straight line and bend into curves, and in curves you get lost. A mistake costs a life, even a small one. And the cold is its own predator, soundless, scentless. Slipping through any membrane the way water finds cracks in stone. Up here, even the toughest redo the math. You are on your own. Not out of cruelty, out of arithmetic. Oxygen is divided, strength is divided, and still it isn't enough. Save one and two may die. You don't find that rule on signs. You learn it in your breathing. Edgar Nolan wasn't a romantic rookie vaulting to the top on a sword of dreams. He was 50, a climber and author with many Himalayan seasons behind him. Respected for precision, a cool head, and the discipline to turn back when the mountain said no. This isn't a tale of pride. It's about how a mountain can beat anyone, even the well-prepared. Edgar had a long-standing conversation with Everest. In the late 80s, he joined an Australian expedition that opened a new line on the north side. He got almost to the upper lip and turned back when altitude flooded his skull and the world turned to padded walls. The summit remained an open parenthesis, and parentheses don't close themselves willingly. Decades passed. His return wasn't a hunt for glory. It was a period at the end of a sentence where the pencil once slipped. He prepared obsessively, training, tests, regimen, lists upon lists. He knew how the grinder worked, and still the mountain had another script. The team of 2006 was exemplary. A commercial expedition with iron discipline. Led by Artyom Voronov, more engineer than gambler. Northern Ridge, camps dialed to the meter, oxygen assigned by name, a Sherpa for each climber, the spine of the team. No improvisational jazz, only marches and shuttle-run acclimatization. For a month, bodies learned to live on minimum. Up and down like the elevator of a tired building. Wind tore at tents, snow cracked like glass under boots. But the schedule held. Edgar moved evenly, carefully, no heroics. Age teaches thrift. He knew how. On the night of the 25th, they set out for the final push from about 8,300. The darkness was thick enough to see. The only piercings were strings of headlamps. Tiny living beads slipping toward the sky. 9 hours up and finally the summit. That sensual curve of horizon that always lies, because it isn't the end. It's halfway. Edgar stood over the world like on a piano lid, panting through his mask in short, angry dog breaths. Joy thin, transparent. Exhaustion viscous, clinging. He took a few photos, swapped his bottle, turned to descend, not knowing his body had already pressed another button. Danger comes when you think you're done. The descent is always harder. Only fatigue pretends otherwise. Everest's disaster stats aren't stories. They're a table. Most deaths happen on the way down. Focus fades. Legs turn foreign. The brain lures you sideways because it hurts and it's afraid. The first signals came almost at once. Edgar shook. His steps broke into slides. Coordination left like light from a window. The two Sherpas with him chalked it up to post-summit weakness. But as they lost altitude, weakness turned to delirium and delirium to threat. Edgar sat in the snow and refused to rise. In the death zone, a pause is a sentence. Cold does not wait. High-altitude cerebral edema, two quick words that kill in long form. Cells pull in water. The skull becomes a tight box. Thoughts blink out like stairwell bulbs, one by one. The self stops being its own master. Will, danger sense, bearings, drained. Edgar ripped off his mask and, staring into the spindrift, said in a calm tone they were on a boat and needed to lie on the deck to get warm. He shoved away hands trying to lift him, cursed, tried to walk not where the ropes ran but where the void yawned. On the second step, sheer rock, iron ladders, a queue of nerves. The real drama began. The Sherpas burned time and oxygen, dragging, coaxing, snapping. Edgar was becoming dead weight and wild mind. Then, as if a breaker flipped, he went limp. No breath, no pulse, pupils glassed, unreactive. At this height, even experience retreats. Protocols are short. Radio the camp. Voronov's voice dry and even. Death confirmed. And the order everyone hates to give and to hear. Leave the body, save yourselves. This isn't a movie betrayal. It's life's bookkeeping. Two men at their limit can't lower a grown body down those steps where one wrong move means a group fall. Their oxygen was bleeding out, fingers numb, wind chewing their faces through. They took Edgar's camera and pack, disconnected the system, fixed the location in memory, and went. In the command tent below, the air went sharp with radio silence. Voronov asked once more, not hoping but obliged. The answer held. Edgar was gone. Fear, guilt, cold, packed into one word, copy. And you keep living while you're alive. A liaison called Australia. Rings. Breathing. Claire listened and did not believe. That's how the brain works. It doesn't believe until it touches. She sat on the floor because her legs vanished. The kids slept in the next room. News lines would soon print a brief. Name, age, summit, descent, death zone. Some would scroll past. Some would pause. Forums would debate logistics and ethics. The mountain keeps its own ledger. People keep theirs. The sun left the summit. Edgar remained alone with emptiness on the ridge. No one around except the eternal neighbors, those who hadn't come back before him. The temperature slid to -40. Wind unwound flags of snow. His face turned hammered glass. His chest lay open to the needles of flakes. His mask on the ice beside him. The sky was black and close like the ceiling of a small room. Altitude has a strange mercy. Sometimes it slows you to near stillness. Metabolism drops, the body rations everything. Some say the very edema that should have killed him bought hours by sinking his mind into an icy half-sleep. On nights like that, time doesn't pass. It lies beside you, a frozen companion, staring with empty eyes. Claire didn't sleep. She paced the kitchen in tight circles. The kettle boiled and boiled. The phone lay on the table face up, like a face you begged to speak again. Every rustle felt like the start of another life, but it was only the hiss of gas and the thin bark of the neighbor's dog. At dawn, a new chain of headlamps moved along the north ridge. An American named James Mayer led them, an experienced guide for whom this route was a reread book. They knew about yesterday's death. The radio had warned, "You'll pass the body. Be careful." On Everest, that's part of the landscape, like fixed lines and hard wind slab that won't hold your crampons. At first, far off, they saw a blotchy shape, as if someone had tossed a half-open tent on the ridge. Closer, there was a person, sitting cross-legged on the lip of a 3-kilometer drop. suit open to the chest. No hat, no goggles, fingers white as tallow. On the left, a thin black crack of a future amputation. Mask nearby, as if he'd stepped out on a balcony for air. And in that instant, freeze frame. Not yet time to continue. Questions hung like ice. How did a man left without breath at that height live till dawn? What did he see where the world ends? And what price would a return demand, if return was possible at all? He wet his lips as if tasting the air, and said, almost casually, "Looks like you weren't expecting me." James stopped half a step, like someone had kicked his rope. Then he nodded, reached out a hand. "Hold on. We're here." Edgar stared past him, as if studying a distant harbor. His eyes watered. Snow sparks swam in them. He tried to touch something at his hip, fumbled, froze. Fingers barely obeyed, white, brittle. James crawled closer, pulled a spare beanie over his head, zipped the suit to the chin, slid a chemical warmer under the flap. A Sherpa handed up a bottle. They fixed the mask, opened the flow. A few greedy breaths, and something clicked in Edgar's chest. Air found the way. Warm. He whispered it not to them, to himself. The radio scratched. James keyed in. Found a male. Alive. Sitting below the ridge. Need assistance and oxygen. The pause on the line stretched like a rope in mittens. Then a voice from below, contained, trembling with unbelieving hope. Confirm. Is it Edgar Nolan? Yes. That yes fired like a rocket. The day's plan shattered into splinters. The summit lay close, so close but close turned to trash. James looked at his clients. Guys, we're taking him down. No dramatic pause. Quick eyes, a nod. One man stripped his mitts and pulled them onto Edgar. Another gave his buff and goggles. A third poured sweet tea into a thermos lid. Edgar sipped, burned his lips, smiled guiltily, like a kid caught red-handed. Take the rope, he said, reaching for his safety. I have to swim to the island. It's warm there. Don't touch it, James answered, gentle, not commanding, just fact. The rope is the road. They short-leashed him to the team so they wouldn't lose him in another blackout. The Sherpas worked the hardware in rhythm, checking knots. At this height fingers lie. The radio promised reinforcements coming up. More bottles, a med kit, spare crampons in case teeth snapped. The leader's voice rolled through the static. We're coming to you. Hold on. We're close. Down began with a small war against their own fatigue. The second step yawned dark. Wind shredded tape slings. At the fixed line they knew at once. No clean lower here. Too narrow, too crooked, too much iron in the way. The solution was born on the move. Improvised sled. James stripped the frame from a client's hardpack, re-rigged the straps, threw on loops to haul Edgar onto a stance. Two belayed above, two below like pit musicians. Step. Another. Crampons hissing on ice. Metal clacking. Heavy silence. Edgar drifted in and out. Do you hear the sea? What sea? Blue. There's a boat. Need to lie down. I'm tired. You can't lie down. More tea. 2 sips. Find the eyes again even for a minute. A minute was enough to step past that damned bulge. Time stretched. Minutes grew longer than a suspension bridge's main cable. The Sherpas worked like machines, yet in every motion there was a tenderness. Steadying a shoulder, straightening the mask, cupping a cheek from the wind. On one ledge the rope jammed in an old carabiner. James leaned full weight, freed it, swore under his breath. No yanking, only smooth, springy movement. The radio woke. We left the call, 3 of us. 2 hours. 2 hours where seconds can kill is close to forever. They kept crawling. On an ice section Edgar suddenly arched and clawed at his mask. Stop blowing in my face. It smells like the sea. James caught his eyes. Look at me. Here's the shore. Here. We'll reach it together. Simple words like ropes. You can grab ropes. Edgar grabbed. When the first 3 reached them at last, their carabiners chimed. Bottles jutted from packs like stubby missiles. No grand greetings. Quick exam. Pulse? Present. Consciousness? On and off. Edema? Likely. Tabs under the tongue. New bottle. Ease the flow, don't overheat him. And down again. Steps. Ice even Krampens hate. Sections where everything around you is a place you must not fall, cannot fall. Below, a larger rescue spun up. Artyom Voronov turned around climbers who'd already started down from their own summit. Stretcher rig. Med check. Coordination with nearby teams. Who can spare bottles, who has med staff, who can guard the cruxes. The radio breathed in fragments, sentences glued by fatigue and height. By afternoon, 5 more joined. The team turned into a many-legged creature that could do only one thing: drag a human life downward. They wrung themselves dry but refused to rush where rushing kills. Sometimes they stopped just to breathe. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they laughed. Suddenly, because a joke drifted up from below about hot springs on the North Ridge. The laugh melted fast, but left warmth inside. Toward evening they reached the lines above the North. Kernel below wasn't warm, but it was legible. On the plateau they pitched a small tent, lit the stove, brought water to a boil. They laid Edgar on pads, stuffed puff jackets under his feet to keep the blood from surrendering too quickly. Heat then chills shook him. He tried to explain about a map, the kids, the kitchen light left on. No one cut him off. They just held his forearm through their mitts, checked nail beds, listened. The link to lower camp steadied like a patient's pulse. A doctor bridged the distance. Sedatives, minimal. Keep him from sinking deep. Small sips. Strip off anything wet. Warmth even. Night clenched around the tent like a fist. The wind, exhausted by the day's chase, backed off a little. Inside was cramped, smelling of plastic, wool, chemicals. Someone dozed upright. Someone counted breaths. James watched the tent wall and saw a long line on it like a route on a map. His day had been split in two that morning. Now both halves had fused around a single breath. At the same time, far away on the other side of the world, Claire finally fell into a short, shallow sleep on a kitchen chair. The phone shivered like a hooked fish. The screen flashed. The world shifted again. Claire. Yes. He's alive. Silence. No scream. First, a hush big enough to hold tears. Then she set her palm on the table and whispered, "I hear you." Her breathing evened. The world didn't fall back into place, but it stopped collapsing. In that pause fit an ocean of gratitude for people she had never seen. At dawn they broke camp and moved on. The call fell behind. Ahead, hours more of hard work, slick trails, ice ladders, and dumb shoulder pain for the ones on the ropes. Sometimes Edgar opened his eyes and looked for James. "Are we moving?" "We are." From below, more rescuers were already coming up, roused in the night. They carried a stretcher, fabric tight as a sail. Ahead lay cruxes where they would pass a body from hand to hand like precious freight. Everyone had a role. One on belay. One belaying the belayer. One watching the mask. One marking when to change the flow. The sun rose higher. The world grew brighter and meaner. Snow blinded. Goggles fogged and immediately iced. But the air already smelled of base camp. Not food. Hope. Not far below waited the med tent. Clean bandages. Needles. Syringes. Down there, "You'll be okay" wasn't comfort, it was protocol. Edgar seemed to sense it too. He opened his eyes again, caught James by the sleeve. "Why did you come back?" "Because you're here." He nodded. Simple math. The truest kind. When they reached the advanced camp, time lost meaning. Hands that smelled of ointment and fuel met them. They eased Edgar onto a stretcher, switched him to another oxygen rig, started in 4. The doctor glanced at his hands and feet, shone a light into his eyes. The team exhaled almost in unison. Not victory, transition to the next level. That evening James finally sat on an empty crate and pulled off his boots. His feet throbbed like separate living things. He wrapped his hands around a mug of something hot, breathed the steam, and smiled faintly, without big words. In the next tent someone was already telling the story for radio. Someone else typed a brief on a satellite keypad. The mountain wind still howled as if nothing had happened. But something had. Down on the plains, Claire took out a suitcase. Into it went a sweater, a book, children's drawings, and the letter she'd written all night and never finished. She would fly to Kathmandu, not chasing a miracle, following her husband. Ahead lay a road with yaks and helicopters, delicate surgeries, bills measured not in money, but in patience, and conversations to bring a man back from frozen dark into a home that smells of tea and children's skin. Kathmandu met Edgar with heat and dust. After the white hush of the mountains, the city felt too alive. Thick, spicy air, car horns, another planet. They carried him from the helicopter on a stretcher. The skin of the earth warm, breathing. People spoke languages he didn't know, but the meaning was clear. He was alive. That was all that mattered. Claire waited at the hospital door. In the white corridor, antiseptic mixed with the scent of rain sliding off the roof. When the stretcher stopped, she didn't approach at once. Just stood and looked. His body seemed smaller, face gaunt, eyes closed. Softly, she said, "I'm here." Only then did he open his eyes. One instant, and it felt like the walls between worlds fell. He tried to smile. The lips only twitched. "You told me I had to finish the story." "You did," she answered. "The mountain is not yours anymore." He didn't sleep that first night. Doctors moved around him, changing dressings, checking pressure. Inside, his body held a silence that felt like snow. His mind still wandered at an altitude where sounds do not exist. Sometimes, through the haze, he saw figures approach, but their faces blurred into shapes of ice. At times he thought he heard wind outside. But outside was Kathmandu. Wet, noisy, smelling of gas and mango. The wind lived only in him. A few days later, the doctors allowed Claire to stay longer. She brought tea, laid the kids' photos on the table. In one, a boy in a blue jacket with a mountain drawn on it. "That's you up there, Dad," he said. Edgar stared at the picture a long time, then looked away. "I thought I wouldn't come back," he whispered. Everything went quiet, even fear. She squeezed his fingers, cold, as if still under snow. "You're home now." He didn't answer. Home didn't feel real yet. The mountain doesn't let go at once. A week later, they flew him to Sydney. There the second battle began, without snow, with the same cold inside. The frostbite was deep. Skin on his fingers blackened like charcoal. Doctors tried to save tissue, hyperbaric sessions, meds, but the border between life and death now ran along his fingertips. One morning the surgeon said it straight. "We'll do everything to keep function, but some fingers will be lost." Edgar nodded without drama. He'd seen death closer than anyone in that room. Losing fingers wasn't a tragedy. It was the bill for life. The operation lasted nearly 4 hours. When they wheeled him out, his hands wore white bandages like new gloves. Gloves that would never come off. Claire sat beside him, holding his hand carefully, as if it might shatter. "Does it hurt?" "No," he smiled crookedly. "It's all foreign there now." The first weeks were the hardest. Simple things, buttoning a shirt, pouring tea, holding a pen, required summit-level focus. His physician said, "You'll have to learn your body again." "And my mind?" Edgar asked. "That takes longer." Memory returned in pieces. At night he'd wake to a brush of wind and hear someone call his name. Sometimes a light appeared, not sun, not lamp, the kind you see only high up, where air is thin and stars are near. He told no one, not even Claire. He'd sit up, sip water, and wait for dawn. A psychologist called it post-altitude syndrome. But inside Edgar knew, these weren't just flashbacks. They were memories of a place where borders blur, where life and death braid like two ropes. He started jotting fragments, cold like a thought. Air is optional when the stars are near. See beneath the snow. Fragments became pages. Pages, chapters. A book began. Months passed. Edgar walked unaided again. He learned to hold a spoon with 2 fingers, to type slowly but surely, and, most of all, to speak of that night without his voice shaking. At a press talk, someone asked, "Do you believe in miracles?" He scanned the room, living people, breathing, skin at normal temperature. "No," he said, "I believe in chance, and in those who didn't walk past." Then added, But if you want to call it a miracle, let it be a miracle. The line spread through the news. But the real story wasn't about miracles. It was about strength, about choice, about the way something new can begin even where everything ends. Sometimes Claire caught his gaze drifting to the window. Not sadness, respect. "Still thinking about the mountain?" she asked once. "Sometimes." He smiled. "I don't feel it's cruel, just honest. Will you go back?" "No, I've been. It's someone else's turn." He raised his hand. The white bandages were gone. The skin on his fingers rough and uneven. Every scar a coordinate. One evening he spoke to students. He didn't talk about records or routes. He talked about people. About those who saved him when it was easier to turn away. "There are no heroes in the mountains," he said. "There are only those who choose to remain human. That's harder." After the lecture, a young man asked, "What did you feel when you realized you were alive?" Edgar looked at the window. Rain whispered there. "At first, nothing," he said. "Then I heard water dripping, and I understood that's life. It's always dripping somewhere, even if you don't hear it." He lived 6 more years. He didn't chase, didn't conquer, didn't run. He lived. He wrote, read bedtime stories to the kids, drank morning coffee on a veranda where the wind had turned from mountain knife to ocean breeze. When illness, quiet, incurable, came for him, he met it calmly. Claire sat beside him, holding his hand. He looked at her and said, "I've already died once. I'm not afraid." He left like a wave leaves the shore, without noise, leaving a trace. This isn't a story about conquering a mountain. It's about a man who returned from the void and realized the highest summit is inside. And everyone who hears it can't help asking, if you were up where the air runs out, would you choose the summit or someone's life? Because the real Everest isn't where the snow is. It's here, inside each of us. If this story moved you and you want more, stay with us. Subscribe, leave a like, so you won't miss the moment when a new tale knocks at the door. Drop a single word in the comments, the one that clung to you today. From that one word, our next story may begin.